Hi, I'm Micah Clark. Thank you for joining us today. We have a guest that if you don't know, you soon will, but I think many of you do know. I'm excited to have my friend Micah Beckwith back on today. Many of you know that in the recent election, Micah won with Mike Braun for governor and lieutenant governor. So we have the lieutenant governor-elect, Micah Beckwith, with us, a pastor in Noblesville, was also on the library board, been politically involved, also ran for Congress. So, Mike, it's great to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Busy few months, huh?
It's been
probably a busy year.
It's been a whirlwind. Yeah, year and a half. We started this journey probably a year and a half ago. So
let's get into it. While it's still fresh on people's minds, the election. I was at times very angry with what was done to you, as far as how the left came after you for your faith. You know, they wanted to make you seem like there's this radical pastor, this Christian nationalist, which nobody can define. You know, and they. I said many times, Democrats running for state legislature, running against Jennifer McCormick, running against you. Across the state, they had one message with two prongs to it. Abortion's good, and Micah Beckwith is bad.
That's right.
I mean, that was their message.
That was,
in state house races and in the governor's race. First of all, how did you hold up to that? Did that bother you?
Oh, not at all. No, because, I mean, these people have such a radical far-left ideology that I know is so counter to what I believe. So if they don't like me, if they are vilifying me, I just use that as a good litmus test that I'm doing something right. Yeah. And so I would get those attacks, and I would just take it as a badge of honor, because it's like, these are Marxists, these are anti-American radicals that really, they don't love what America is, they don't love what our foundations are rooted in, and our motto is "In God We Trust," right? And so they would try to, self-proclaim Christian nationalists, and I do self-proclaim, like, I love Christ, and I love my nation, and so I don't back away from that, because they want you to somehow back away from Christian and nationalism, and the opposite of nationalism is globalism, and I'm not gonna succumb to globalist ideology. America is sovereign. Americans should be sovereign, and we need to be that city on a hill for the world, because our leadership is that important. But and the reason we are a good nation is because we're rooted in Judeo-Christian principles. And if I love American history, and one of the great books and works of the 1800s was by a French philosopher and politician named Alexis de Tocqueville, and he wrote a book called Democracy in America, and he wanted to study why the French Revolution didn't work and the American Revolution did work. And so he came over and he said, not until I stepped foot into the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with fire and righteousness did I realize that America is good. And if America is great because of its goodness, and if America ever ceases to be good, it will cease to be great. And so I think that's, to me, I take all that in. And so these people who are attacking me, they don't know American history. They don't understand the roots of our republic, and so it was, to me, it was always encouraging when I would get those shots. And
I guess if you're irrelevant, they don't pay attention to you.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. If you're over the target, you're going to take fire.
Right.
And I thought too, one of the things I did intentionally was I drew fire. I purposely drew fire away from Mike Braun.
Right.
And because nobody's really voting for the lieutenant governor, they're voting for the governor. So if I could get the Democrats just shooting at me, well, then that leaves Mike sort of, nice
and his platform. Talk about his issues.
Right, nice and pristine. They did not attack Mike hardly at all.
No.
And so I thought that was great. I thought that was a great strategy, and it proved to work really well because we won with such a big margin.
Well, let's talk about that, because I was hearing polling, and I'm sure you saw stuff I didn't see, but I had a bit of a question because you had another person running, Donald Rainwater, running for Libertarian. I was kind of concerned, how much is he going to pull? And he's obviously going to pull mostly from Braun, from the Republican side. And there was, of course, one kind of anomaly poll done by the Democratic Governors Association showing Jennifer McCormick within 4 points, within the margin of error. I was a little concerned that Mike might not get 50%, but you guys did very well on election day. Surprised, I think, a lot of people. Was it 55 or 56%?
Yeah, about 55. Yeah,
that's quite good in a three-way race.
Yeah, it is.
So their attacks on you essentially failed, I think.
Yeah, well, and they were saying that I was going to pull the ticket down, and we had people in the Republican Party who don't like me either, and they were saying the same thing. They were trying to sow dissension and discord within the Republican Party. Oh, Mike is too extreme. Mike is too radical. But what they don't realize, and a lot of those people are the elitists in the Republican Party. They don't recognize what the people have been saying over the last 5-6 years. I do, because I've been with the people, and so I was out there being a champion of that message that the people are fed up with both sides, really, with Republicans and Democrats. And the people aren't fed up with Republican principles, they're fed up with Republican leadership. And so I was out there just a champion of that message. And come election night, we had a huge victory. We gave a big smackdown to the Democrats, and it proved that the message that I was shouting from the rooftops really resonated with the people of Indiana, and then we saw it across the country too. Trump's election was huge, and he won the popular vote, and obviously the Electoral College too. But I think overall, 2020, Donald Rainwater got about 11% of the vote, and
which is huge for libertarians.
Big time. I mean, that was there were a couple of counties that he took second in, and which was a big thing for the libertarians. But in this election, went down to 4%, and I think I was able to get that 7-8% of the libertarians back into the Republican fold, because most of those libertarians, they're not really there because they want to be there. They're there because they really feel like the Republican Party has left them, and the Democrats are too crazy. They can't join with the Democrats. And so I think when I won the convention, I think it gave them hope that, okay, there could be a new day in the Republican Party in Indiana, and we've got somebody who really does champion our values back in the executive branch.
So what do you see for Governor-elect Braun, former Senator Braun, his top agenda points? I know you were talking about certain things, and that's kind of part of a two-tier campaign. But tell us a little bit for our audience, what you think is property tax the big issue maybe they have to deal with? Yeah, I know it's a budget year too.
Yeah.
What's his passion?
I think property tax has become one of the biggest issues, and we'll probably see that being if not the top issue, one of the top issues for the Braun administration. The legislature has already said that they're going to be looking into this. Now, what comes from that, and how it could be one of a thousand different solutions, but we're going to address at least part of the problem. Property taxes have just run out of control for many years. People are feeling the pinch. Add Bidenomics and inflation into that, people can't afford hardly to pay for their groceries anymore. And so we as Republicans in the state, we need to do everything we can to pull the burden off the shoulders of the people. And that does mean that you'll have to cut spending, you'll have to tighten the government's belt. I think that's Mike's probably big passion. If you want to ask, if you're asking me what's his passion, I think his passion is really just trimming the fat and making government run efficiently like a business.
And I appreciate that, because there's a lot of attention right now in Washington, D.C. with Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk having this office to look at government. We all know about the government waste in D.C., but it does happen in the state too somewhat. And I think it's good timing for him to be talking about that when attention's on it in D.C. I think that's going to be a lot more popular than maybe some people realize, to do that in Indiana too. I think every state office can cut by 5 or 10% and still do what they're doing.
Easy. So. Yeah, we've gotten bloated. Government never shrinks itself organically. It always grows itself organically. And when I was out running before the convention, one of my campaign points or platform points was, have your taxes gone up in Indiana, and has government grown in Indiana? And the answer to that is yes and yes. And it's been under Republican leadership, which we are the low taxes and limited government party. So something's not connecting there. So I would say, hey, listen, if you think that taxes are getting easier for you and government is limited in a very healthy way, then don't vote for me. But if you think that's not the case, then vote for me, because I believe in Republican principles. The problem is we've had Republicans who don't adhere to those Republican principles. So you're right. Right now, the nation wants it. And the state, I think, is ready for it too, to trim back. Nobody's crying for the government. We're not saying, oh, poor government, you don't have all the money you need. Right. They're looking at their own families and their own futures, and they're saying, what am I going to do? How am I going to afford this? And so it's a real hard sell for local units of government to say, well, we want a new football field, or we want a weight room that's world class, so we're going to tax you more for that. And people are saying, "Whoa, hold on a second, like that's not what we signed up for." And so I think Mike, and especially me especially, we'll be hawks on those kinds of things and make sure that we get government back into right alignment.
Well, I think regardless of whether or not government's run well or not well, and obviously if you compare Indiana to Illinois or Indiana to D.C., and even the business ratings, we're usually in the top 5 states for good governance, low taxes, things like that, good business. But even at that, just the nature of government, I think every 10 years, every 15 years, it's good to do some type of audit, top-down review, see if we're being as efficient as we can, because there's always waste that creeps in.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's also places that probably need more funding and places that have too much funding. I mean, we certainly have a lot of needs in child welfare stuff, things like that.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a efficiency reallocation of where funds should go.
Yeah, I think it's spot on. And in the business world, you have to constantly be reevaluating where your money's going to. Are you getting the reward, the bang for your dollar that you want? And in government, we get a little lazy, and so I think Indiana. I heard a state legislator say a few months ago, and I love it. He said Indiana is well managed but poorly run or poorly led, and I think that was really insightful. Well managed but poorly led. Leadership takes vision. And I would say that Indiana doesn't really, the Republicans haven't done a good job of giving good vision. Where are we going? What's the goal? What's the passion? How are we going to inspire people to partner with us because we're all doing this together. A politician, we work for the people, right? So our job as politicians is to inspire the people, and then let them tell us what they want. We take that into consideration and then put together a vision that says, okay, we're going to go this way. And I just don't think we've had that real strong in Indiana. So I think Mike will do a good job of.
Well, Indiana's always kind of been known as a state that doesn't really push the envelope. I think we're the 33rd state for charter schools.
Yeah.
Now, once in a while, we'll get out ahead of some other states, but usually we tend, and this isn't bad, but we tend to see, okay, what are other states doing?
Yeah.
It's time for us to get on board. But that, like you said, that's not really.
It's not leadership.
The states that get a lot of attention, like Florida, Arkansas, Oklahoma,
Texas,
Tennessee, Texas, are a little more cutting edge, or a little more. They lead with a lot of things. And we could be one of those states because we've got great ideas and great leadership. It's just.
I think that's a great point, and some of the legislators would take issue with me when I was out on the campaign trail, saying that we really aren't a very conservative state, because they'd be like, well, we're very conservative. We do all those things that are conservative. And I would say, well, then why aren't we talked about in the national news? You never hear Indiana when they're talking about Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas. You never hear Indiana mentioned with I would say, the great states that are doing great things to address the issues of our day. And they can't deny that. We just aren't in that category. But we do technically have a stronger conservative legislator than most of those states that were.
In the studies, we do quite well. It's just in the attention we don't. Because we don't want to. We're very cautious. Indiana is very much a cautious state. We'll wait to see what Oklahoma does.
Right.
Right.
And if they crash and burn, then we won't do it.
Right.
If somehow they survive, then maybe we'll look at it. But again, that's not leadership. That's
I will say to Indiana's credit, had we waited 6 months and not done the special session on abortion, I don't think we would have ever passed the pro-life law.
That's right.
We did. Yeah. So we did a good job on protecting life.
It was to your point, that was a give honor to where honor's due, and we did get a good just being the first state in the nation to ban abortion after Roe was overturned. I think was a amazing
it was a God
staple.
thing.
It was a God thing.
I don't think it would have happened 6 months later.
No, you're right. I think they would have lost the fire.
Timing's everything in politics.
That's right. Yeah.
So you've probably got a huge learning curve. I know you're working on staffing and other things, and I also know from talking to some of your people, you've talked a lot with Lieutenant Governor Crouch, Becky Skillman, who was a phenomenal lieutenant governor as well.
Yeah.
How do you feel? You feel like you're drinking out of a fire hose right now?
A little bit, but I've got a really good team around me too, and I think we've got a team of outsiders and insiders, right? So I've built a team of people who I don't want it to be all one set of people. I don't want it all outsiders, and I don't want it all insiders. I've got some people who have been there, who have worked with the LG's office, that understand the ins and outs, that are a part of my team, and I've got outsiders that are going to be bringing their business perspective or their outside. I mean, I genuinely, truly am an outsider. People run on that all the time, like I'm an outsider.
Right.
Well, really, I am as outside of this as they come, and so that can be a great benefit.
You're the only lieutenant governor I know of in my lifetime that's not held prior political office and now one elected governor. So.
And it can be a benefit.
Yeah.
But there's also some weaknesses there too, right? Sure. And so, and I know that, and so we are drinking from a fire hose. But I think the team that God's assembled around us has been
so for
fantastic.
Our audience. In fact, I don't know all the details, but why don't you have an overview of what the lieutenant governor does?
Yeah.
What your job will be? I know there's several different divisions under your office.
So you have constitutional duties and statutory duties. Okay. So constitutionally, you're the president of the Senate. You cast tie-breaking vote if there's ever
much like the vice president.
Exactly. Yep. And so you proceed over the Senate or preside over the Senate proceedings. And that's I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be, I think, a neat experience to just be in there, and then the stats. But that's really just constitutionally, and then you're a heartbeat away from the governor's office. Obviously, God forbid if there's anything that goes down there. But the statutorial side, you oversee. Really, the big one is OKRA. The legislature gave that to the lieutenant governor.
And that's not a vegetable.
That's not a vegetable. OKRA stands for Office of Community and Rural Affairs.
Right.
And basically, the best way to describe it, it's small business development for small communities, right? And I love that. I'm a small business entrepreneur myself. I love the small business or small rural communities. I think that's it's really important to make economic prosperity happen in these small communities. Because we want people to stay there, live there, play there. We don't want them to have to move to Chicago or Indianapolis to find good paying jobs. So that will be a big part of what I do. And then you're also the Secretary of Agriculture, and that's and again, coming from a dairy background, I love that as well. I mean, my family was in the dairy industry, and I have a big love and respect for farmers, and really, agriculture really is the backbone economy in Indiana. Yeah. And so those are really the two big ones. And then what I think we're going to do, we're going to create some initiatives that will just be kind of my passion, my heart. One of the initiatives that we're looking at creating is a faith initiative, getting churches involved. How can the church engage in their community, partner with the government, and be a blessing to the government and not a burden. And teaching pastors how to navigate the political waters. People will say that Mike, they'll look at my church or something like that because that's what I do in my day job. I'm a pastor. They'll say, "Oh man, your church is becoming way, way, way political." And my response is, "No, the church isn't becoming more political. Politics is becoming more theological." And so politics has really veered into the lane of dictating something different than what God says on really important issues like marriage, life, authority of the parents in the home. And so when the government starts coming into this lane that really the church it's their lane, then the pastors and the churches have a duty and responsibility to push back on the government and say, get out of our lane. And we always hear separation of church and state, and people will use that against us, use that against me when I'm kind of coming into the government's lane. But I'm saying, listen, you guys do it all the time in the church lane. You guys want to redefine the sanctity of life or the sanctity of marriage or the responsibility of parents and the authority of parents. You guys do this all the time in government. You have no problem coming into a church and telling a church to shut down during COVID, right? You were all for that, and so. It's a little disingenuous for them to say, "Oh, well, you have a pastor coming into the state world. That's separation of church and state." So you guys have been in our lane way too long, and I'm just kicking you out. That's what I'm doing.
Something that I do think that some policy people realize this who've done some backgrounds. Others either don't or don't want to admit it. Some people are so wedded to government that they can only see that through that tunnel. But churches do an enormous amount, and they could do a lot more in welfare. And there's a thing that we helped pass a couple years ago called the Care Portal. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I love it.
But basically, it's DHS or DCS or one of these agencies that does welfare issues. If they are told of a need in, say, where you and I live in Noblesville, and they go to the Care Portal, A church might be there to say, hey, if someone needs a crib, someone needs clothing, needs food, we'll help that. We've got that.
Yeah.
Because churches have pantries, they have other things. Churches want to help in that way. And throughout our history, it was churches who cared for the poor.
Yeah.
And so this kind of links government with needs, lets churches know voluntarily if they want to help with a need, here's a need.
That's good. And our church has been a part of the Care Portal.
Yeah,
and
faith-based initiatives.
We love it.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to, it's a private-public partnership. Right. And we've saved some families from losing their kids because they just couldn't provide the necessities of what it takes to be a parent. And so they would say, hey, DCS is going to come in and take your kids because they don't have clothes, a crib, food. And then goes out to the Care Portal, and our church has responded many times
before the government does.
That's right. Yeah. We'll say, hey, we'll buy you what you need, and then the parents don't lose their children, right? Because they can't afford to keep their kids. So
it also connects the family, and this is probably what the left won't like about it, but it's not the intention. But the reality is it connects a family with the local church that cares about them.
That's right.
Rather than calling down to the Indianapolis office or the state government building, there's a church in their neighborhood that can help them. And maybe they take their kids to church on Sunday, or they get connected with that local body.
This all goes back to Judeo-Christian principles. So in the Old Testament, the Lord established the three institutions. He established the family first, the government second, and then the church third. If you study Genesis and Exodus, you can kind of see that play out. And they all have their responsibilities. Someone's always supposed to be the main shareholder, if you will, and then the other two institutions are more backup. So you look at who did God give the authority to raise children? It wasn't the government. It wasn't the church. It should be the family, and then the church comes alongside the family as backup, and then the government's a safety net. Same thing in whose authority was it to care for the poor, the needy, the orphan, the widow, the sick? It wasn't the government's. And it wasn't necessarily the families. It's supposed to be the churches, right? Yeah. And the family backs up the church, and the government's the safety net. Whose job is it to go to war and defend the sovereignty and the liberties of the people? It's the government's job. That's who God said. And it's not the church's job. And we see what happens when the church tries to do that. You get what happened. You get the crusade. You get what happened in the Dark Ages, right? Where the church totally overextended themselves. People will ask, well, why is the VA not successful? The Veterans, Affairs, the hospital, and why isn't that successful? Well, because God never ordained the government to have a hospital. It was never the government's job to take care of the sick. Isn't it interesting that all the successful hospitals or healthcare networks that we see, many of them have a religious connotation? St. Jude's, Lutheran, the Methodist Hospital, the Baptist Network, Hospital Network, Ascension was even, St. Vincent's. You see, why are they successful? Well, because they birth out of the proper institution. And so when we align the authority with where God says the authority was birthed out of, it's going to be more successful. And it doesn't mean that, a place like St. Vincent's really isn't, I wouldn't say necessarily a bulwark of Christian truth anymore, but it birthed out of the right institution, so it's
for centuries. That's how it was done.
That's right. And so we just got to get back into alignment. And typically, what happens is there's a problem in the society, and everyone says, "Well, the government should fix it."
Right.
No, that's not always the maybe, but not
the
always.
Private sector is more effective.
100%.
There are things that only the government can do.
Yeah.
And they should, but there's other things where if the government's doing it, we step back and don't do it. And it's not as effective.
That's right.
Efficient.
Yeah. And again, just go. What does God say? Whose job is this to really step up and lead on this? And so I think that's and really government. It's very limited. I can't build a government should only do for you what you could not do for yourself. Yeah. So I couldn't go out and build a road through multiple communities. Right? Okay, that's government infrastructure. That's government. I could not muster a military to defend my sovereignty and my liberty. So that's the government's job. And really, outside of that, there's very few. Government was never supposed to be in education. Right. That was never the government's job. I love what Trump's doing with talking about eliminating the Department of Ed. Which is great. Send it back to the states.
Because we send all our money out there. They take a chunk of it, send it back to us with strings attached to it.
That's right.
Let's just cut the middleman out, leave it in the state, let the state.
Makes no sense. I mean, it's just, talk about government inefficiency. It's like we give you our money, and then you send some of it back to us and tell us what to do with it. Why don't we just keep our money in the first place and just do what we feel is best for our state? Yeah. So.
Well, congratulations.
Thank
I'm
you
happy
so much.
for you. Please ask people to pray for you.
Yes.
And the Governor-elect Braun as well. and all your leaders. Pray for your leaders. But thanks for coming in. I was getting busy. When did they swear you in? It was January
13th, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's is that a Monday? Yeah, January 13th is the swearing-in ceremony. I think the weekend prior, we're still kind of getting some of the plans. I think the weekend prior will be sort of all the inaugural balls, kind of the festivities. So would love to have you, and certainly for anyone who would like to come to the swearing-in, they're more than welcome. It's very humbling. It's an honor, and specifically if you could pray for just anyone watching this, they've been asking, how can we pray for you? Really, I think generally speaking, I've just been praying the prayer of Solomon. Lord, give me wisdom and knowledge, right? Because if I have those two things, if I have godly wisdom and godly knowledge, then I'll know how to address the situations. And Solomon prayed that prayer specifically so he could lead the people well, God's people well, right? And so that's really my heart, is I want to lead people well. I don't want to lord over them like a king, and I don't want to get steamrolled underneath any institutional sort of bureaucracy. So you're going to need wisdom and knowledge to be able to stay humble and also to be effective. And so that's that's just kind of the prayer I've been asking people to pray. So
well, we will definitely do that.
Thank you.
Pray for that. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it gives you a kind of a picture of what Micah Beckwith is like, who he is, what the Lieutenant Governor's office is. And thank you for joining us today. I'm Micah Clark with American Family Association. Have a wonderful weekend.